Okay, so well, actually, Piero Ligorio died on this day, October 30th, in 1583. The date, the precise date of his birth is unknown, if I remember correctly. A very interesting Italian architect. I am only going to show two works, but two major works by him. There are others, but in the rush of putting up a PowerPoint presentation, I chose to just address these two works. So let's read a little bit about him. As you can see, he died on October 30th, 1583. He was an Italian architect, Piero Ligorio, an Italian architect, painter, antiquarian, and garden designer during the Renaissance period. He worked as the Vatican's papal architect under Popes Paul IV and Pius IV, designed the fountains at Villa d'Este at Tivoli for Cardinal Ippolito II d'Este, and served as the ducal antiquary in Ferrara. Ligorio emphasized and showed a deep passion for classical Roman antiquity. But what is not mentioned in this short note that I took from Wikipedia is another remarkable work, truly remarkable, and that is the Bomarzo Park, which is attributed to him, but I consulted various sources, and they all say that it was conceived and designed by him, although there was a team of workers. And I'm going to show the Bomarzo Park, which is indeed quite unique and remarkable. But maybe because of its strangeness, it's not mentioned in all scholastic sources. So let's see. I will begin with a few images, drawings. This is, I don't know if it's a self-portrait or someone drew him. Maybe it's a self-portrait of Ligorio, Piero Ligorio. And you can understand his importance if after the death of Michelangelo, he was put in charge of the works at San Pietro, which is not a little thing. Now, drawings, some drawings by Piero, this unknown to me until two days ago, architect from the Renaissance. Now, of course, he drew well, because every major artist, and not so major, drew very well at that time. You know, they didn't have cameras, they didn't have Photoshop, they didn't have the tools we have, so they had to draw. And, you know, the best of them drew beautifully, as we can see. I mean, it's very hard, you know, to differentiate actually between the quality of this drawing and drawings by other masters of the Renaissance. So I just show some drawings, and now we go to a very important work by him. And I visited Villa d'Este in Tivoli. It's not far away from Rome. It's close to Rome. I went to visit the famous, Adrian's villa in Tivoli, the emperor's, large, estate with ruins, but magnificent ruins. But in the same place, the same town in Tivoli, there is Villa d'Este with unbelievable fountains. And the garden of Villa d'Este, or should I say the gardens of Villa d'Este, are truly remarkable. And they were designed by this architect. And I'll just show images of this work. I actually think that apparently he was also in charge with the building, but there were other architects involved. It's not very sure to what extent he contributed to the building, but the fountain design and the sculptures and so on, they belong to him. Although it's possible he had some help as well. It's true that the landscape, the terrain, the land is very spectacular because it's sloping. But beyond this, the configuration of the gardens and the beautiful fountains are truly unique. And there is drama, there is theater, and there is this vitality that makes the gardens of Villa d'Este quite a phenomenon. Apparently, in the building of both the structures that are part of the garden and the building itself, there were used materials from Adrian's villa, ancient Roman stones and bricks, so to speak. Now we are in almost November here, so maybe we are not so inclined to need images of exuberant fountains, but it doesn't matter the season. I think the beauty of what we look at is very refreshing. And I like this mixture between water and the work of man. I mean, the fountain itself is the work of man, but this the ambiance which was designed by and made by this architect is quite remarkable. Probably because of his training or his interest, because he was an antiquarian, he had interests, diverse interests, even in engineering, and he was very knowledgeable about past Italian architecture. You can see somehow that what he did here is infused with a sense of time, of history, even if it's landscape design in a way. But look at it, and you have mythology, you have sculptures, you have water, running water, and it's both cultured and primitive. And this I like very much, this mixture between culture and some kind of a telluric primitive quality. Here, for example, we have clearly the will of the architect, with an almost so-called classical theme, talking in design terms, but other parts of the garden are quite wild and archaic almost. I have been inside the building too. The building is also nice. I only show the gardens now, and they are quite ample. You have the building, and what's going on here. It's a large estate, and it's recognized by UNESCO, which it is an acknowledged value in the field of architecture and design. He is considered a Mannerist architect, and Mannerism has its own peculiarities, but also it's somehow very so-called modern, because it's destabilizing the canons of not dogmatic, the canons of classical architecture. So there is a different sensibility here, and we are going to see it in extreme in the next work that I showed, the Bomarzo Park, which is unique, even more than what we look at here. Apparently here there is an avenue of, I don't know, 100 or 1,000, I think 100 fountains. I think that's how it is called at Villa d'Este. There is truly a variety of fountains here, and I love fountains in general. I even have a presentation with the fountains of Rome. Well, this is, I don't know how many kilometers, not too many. It's close, in the proximity of Rome. Now, please remember this image, and we'll realize that the Bomarzo Park, which is attributed to him, it is his. It's because the similarity is striking. They're quite splendid, these gardens, and you know, just losing yourself on the pathways of the garden with so many fountains all around you is truly a beautiful experience, with sculptures, with mythological figures. Also the uniqueness of the sloping terrain is also a plus. Who lived here, you know, I can say it was a blessing to live here. Because again, it's about this mixture between nature and culture, which I think is beautiful. I mean, look, even here, you can contemplate this figure, you know, for a long time. And if you have the knowledge, the narrative knowledge to relate to it in knowledgeable terms, I think the enjoyment is even higher. It's mysterious, it's ancient, it's peculiar, it's many things, both during the day and during the night. Lots of water, it's true. I mean, you know, that there was, I mean, you know, you could say that in a certain way, it's also, you know, an excessiveness that from our point of view, maybe should be a little bit questioned. But, you know, at that time when this was made, I guess people didn't have so much concern with the, you know, diminishing resources and so on. Plus, the water is most surely collected and maybe it is recycled. I don't know. But it is a splendid work. And yes, I do think, actually, initially, I wanted to make a presentation called Fountains and Fireworks, because in the second presentation that I will make tonight, I will show some works of Bernard Tschumi, somehow relating to Ezra Pound. I mean, I made this connection. Maybe no one else would have, but I made it, and I'll explain why. So fountains and fireworks, you know, on one hand, water, on the other hand, well, fire, although fireworks are not necessarily fire as we know it, but they both the fountains, like we look at them here at d'Este, and the fireworks that I will show, which Bernard Tschumi considered the best architecture, they both have an exuberance. They are both, you know, outgoing and vital, and as such, you know, I think you can, with both water and fire, create, you know, tumultuousness. Sorry. Now, the avenue of 100 fountains, with a fragment of it, I mean, just think of it, an avenue of 100 fountains. But I'm sure the garden has many more, not just 100. This is just a fragment of what is called the Avenue of 100 Fountains. Now we arrive at the second work that I show, which is attributed to him. And I knew of this park for a long time, but I didn't know who designed it. I didn't know who was in charge of it. He was the main commission to do this, but he worked with sculptors and all other kinds of works because it's a complex work. And you will be probably very surprised because this is a work that questions many of the assumptions of so-called classical design. Let's read a little bit about it. The architect and antiquarian Piero Ligorio, commissioned by Prince Pier Francesco Orsini, known as Vicino Orsini, designed and oversaw the construction of the park in 1547, raising the genre of grotesque to a system in the mythological figures represented there. Some scholars erroneously trace the direction to Michelangelo Buonarroti, that person, Guidoni, while others, in particular for the temple, cited the name of Jacopo Barozzi da Vignola. The realization of the sculptures was probably entrusted to Simone Moschino. Orsini called the park simply Grove and dedicated it to his wife, Giulia Farnese, not to be confused with the homonymous concubine of Pope Alexander VI. Impossible architectures, such as the inclined house or the tilted house, or some enigmatic statues, according to some, represent the stages of an itinerary of alchemical origin. So again, Piero Ligorio, the architect and antiquarian Piero Ligorio, was commissioned by Vicino Orsini to design and oversee the construction of the park in 1547. Vicino Orsini, I read, was a visionary when he created the garden. Well, he commissioned it, but in a way, yes, he was the originator of this garden. No one knows what was in his mind or heart, light or darkness, when he conceived of the creatures the garden possesses. He ordered the following to be cut into stone. Thou who enter this garden, be very attentive and tell me then if these marvels have been created to deceive visitors or for the sake of art. The tilted house. This was done intentionally, and you know, such things are being done today, or they were done during the construction. This was done, you know, in the 16th century. Look at this. It was done intentionally like this. And you wonder why. Well, you know, maybe the reason for this was some kind of a melancholia, maybe contemplating the end of life, the falling into ruin of everything. Who knows? An anticipation of the end of life, you know, some kind of showing death that we know that she or it will come one day. I don't know, but it's part of this park, and it's not the strangest thing that you saw yet. Interesting, no? The 16th century. And they did it with stone, you know. They it's amazing in a way. Apparently this park fell in you know, disarray. It was neglected, it was invaded by nature, it was abandoned, and apparently a real estate agent discovered it and bought the estate, and you know, cleaned it up, and well, to an extent. And now is the, well, until the pandemic, it was the destination for a lot of tourism. I don't know how many thousands of people come here because it's close to Rome, and is a very unexpected, well, expected thanks to publicity, but an unusual experience. And you are going to see very soon more. And look at that building. It was built like this. And such gestures would be maybe not so surprising today, but at that time it was. The tilted house at Bomarzo Park. I love this picture. I really do. I only found it in one place. I'm not even sure it's, well, I think it's part of the Bomarzo Park, but it's amazingly modern. And, you know, it's very moving because you have the work of man, a sculpture, statue, become almost nature. And the expression on the face also, you know, the eternal sleep. It's very moving. Now, there seems to be no real plan of the placement of the monstrosities. They are randomly positioned in the garden. The symmetry of garden design popular during the period it was built is nowhere to be seen. There is nothing orderly here, just surprise and shock. There is an inscription on one monument that says, just to set the heart free. And I will repeat this, just to set the heart free. And if we have in our activities and in our mind and in our heart, this phrase continuously, maybe our life would become a little bit more interesting. Anyway, look at this. This is the river god sculpted by this, apparently it was sculpted because he was also a sculptor, this architect, or a sculptor did it based on his drawings. But it is remarkable because it has this telluric force, this weight. You know, it's stone, but it's stone which is already in some kind of an embrace with the elements, with nature. And what is here on the left, some kind of an animal, you know, emerging from underneath his hand. So, you know, I like the fact that the statues are not cleaned up. They are not, there is already a sign that the elements, nature, you know, attacked. And so it's this tension embrace, as I call it, between nature and culture, which to me is very moving. But all kinds, it's very possible that this work was infused with alchemical overtones. Look, what's going on here? What is this monster here? We don't know. But let's take a look a little further. You that this was what was carved in a stone at Bomarzo, in a stone bench, you that are wandering through the world, willing to see high and splendid marvels, do come here where there are horrible faces, elephants, lions, bears, ogres, and dragons. And indeed there are. Look here. You know, it's truly a unique work, and maybe some kind of secret, so-called secret, ancient knowledge was at work here. It is mysterious, and we don't know. I don't know. We don't know the symbolism of these figures. Look at this. You know, it's people enter there, tourists enter there. There is terror on this face. No doubt. I mean, it is a half sculpture, half building. You can enter through that open mouth and you know, expect anything there to happen. The children are laughing there and are amused, but look at the face. Look at the expression of the face. This is the Renaissance. Well, the later part of the Renaissance, but still, you know, this architect and scholar, he was also a scholar. He is considered a Renaissance man and a very important man in the Renaissance culture, though less known than others. Very interesting, this park, and I think also very, in a way, very modern, because our anxieties are externalized here in interesting ways, and you know, everything, all these statues, communicate a mysterious message somehow. They seem to be older actually than just so-called just from the 16th century. The history of the monster spark. The garden was created at the time when alchemy, astrology, and magic were banned. However, at the same time, this heretic and hermetic world attracted the minds of intellectuals as enlightened as Prince Pier Francesco Orsini. So it was some kind of an underground movement, if we are to use the language of today. But it is remarkable that it came into being. there seems to be here some kind of a so-called secret knowledge. And that's why perhaps, you know, the commentators think that there might be some alchemical meanings here. This, you know, this so-called dark art, here it is in the 16th century, mid 16th century, you know, after a number of years of splendid, luminous Renaissance, you know, activity, this kind of, you know, dark art survived. And here it is shown with incredible force, you know, and it is in a way a phenomenon, this park, because usually the monsters had been, you know, cleared out after the Middle Ages. You know, the Renaissance proclaimed order, you know, equilibrium, Apollonian aspirations, proportion, you know, perspective, linear perspective. And here we have a different world, the world of monsters, the world of unreason. I think this park deserves reflection, and this deserves study, and maybe a more legitimate presence in the histories of art. Okay, and now we go to the second presentation today, because a very important poet was born today, and I'm talking about Ezra Pound. And by the way of him, I will show some works, avant-garde works that I think do connect somehow with him. But let's say a few words about Ezra Pound, who was not an architect, but a very interesting cultural figure. Ezra Pound, born 1885, 1972. He had a longer name, Ezra Weston Loomis Pound. Strange, you know, only now I notice, I should have noticed earlier that one of his names is Loomis. And there were some accusations from some people. He was even interned in a psychiatric hospital for 12 years. Because, you know, he was kind of accused of or described as a lunatic. So Loomis, lunatic, Loomis, Loomis. Anyway, the 30th, he was born on October 30th, 1885, was an expatriate American poet and critic, a major figure in the early modernist poetry movement, and unfortunately, a fascist collaborator in Italy during World War II. His works include Ripostes, 1912, Hag, Selwyn, Moberly, 1920, and his 800-page epic poem, The Cantos, from 1917 and 1962. Pound's contribution to poetry began in the early 20th century with his role in developing images, a movement stressing precision and economy of language. Working in London as a foreign editor of several American literary magazines, he helped discover and shape the work of contemporaries such as T.S. Eliot, Ernest Hemingway, and James Joyce. He was responsible for the 1914 serialization of Joyce's A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, a beautiful book which I read and I recommend, and the 1915 publication of Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and the serialization from 1918 of Joyce's Ulysses. Hemingway wrote in 1932 that for poets born in the late 19th or early 20th century, not to be influenced by Pound would be like passing through a great blizzard and not feeling its cold. Interesting that, you know, he compared the presence of Pound with cold, not with heat. Anyway, this was the man, and he paid a heavy price sympathizing with fascism and with Mussolini. And as I said, he was interned in a psychiatric institute. Well, initially he was imprisoned, and community of writers protested. And anyway, in the end, for 12 years, 12 long years, he was in a psychiatric institution. But he lived a very long life, close to 90 when he died. I think he was a very interesting man. And you can tell from his face that he was quite intense and fragile in his intensity, because by definition, poets are very fragile, even when they rebel against everybody and everything. But he was a remarkable man. And yes, he made his mistakes politically. Other brilliant minds did the same, like Heidegger or Knut Hamsun or Emil Nolde, even Philip Johnson, the well-known architect. He sympathized with fascism, which is, regrettable. But you wonder, how come that these people, brilliant minds, were seduced? They were seduced by something in that horrid, movement, which provoked a terrible war and incredible destruction and death. Anyway, here he is, Ezra Pound. I suggest both to myself and to others to read or to attempt to read his poetry. I will just show here some quotations from him, which maybe will make us discuss or will make us think. So some quotations from Ezra Pound. For example, the artist is always beginning. Any work of art which is not a beginning, an invention, a discovery, is of little worth. I totally agree with him. And unfortunately, many people think that they do art without beginning anything, without inventing anything, without discovering anything. And that, to me, is not art. I think he's right, and not just from a modern point of view. So again, the artist is always beginning. Like Louis Kahn said, beginnings are in harmony with the human nature. Any work of art which is not a beginning, meaning, that work didn't discover anything, it does not represent a cultural mourning. Any work of art which is not a beginning, an invention, a discovery, is of little worth. Here he says, it ought to be illegal for an artist to marry. If the artist must marry, let him find someone more interested in art or his art, or the artist part of him than in him. After which, let them take tea together 3 times a week. So, in his sweet sarcasm, he seemed to be rather, skeptical about the virtues of marriage in the case of artists. Here, another, I think, brilliant quotation. A slave is one who waits for someone to come and free him. I would agree, yes. A slave is someone who is complacent in his slavery and expects someone else to save him or her. It doesn't work like this. If you are not to be a slave, you have to fight for freeing yourself. Genius is the capacity to see 10 things where the ordinary man sees only one, Ezra Pound. Glance is the enemy of vision. Yes, because, glancing is just, having a quick look. Vision requires, meditation, insight, longer insight, and so on. Good writers are those who keep the language efficient. That is to say, keep it accurate, keep it clear. It doesn't matter whether the good writer wants to be useful or whether the good writer wants to be harmed. Music begins to atrophy when it departs too far from the dance. Poetry begins to atrophy when it gets too far from music. Interesting thought. Because yes, it's true, music and dance should belong together, and poetry should be connected with music as well. So I think his thought is rather interesting and expressed succinctly. All great art is born of the metropolis. Now here, I don't know, maybe Rem Koolhaas would agree with his OMA, Office of Metropolitan Architecture. Uh, Certain people wouldn't agree. In fact, in Romania, I don't know, was it Eminescu or Lucian Blaga who said that a poet has to be born in the village, in rurality. So apparently in opposition to what Ezra Pound thought. Anyway, if a man isn't willing to take some risk for his opinions, either his opinions are no good or he is not good. Probably true. And New York is the most beautiful New York is the most beautiful city in the world. Well, when he made this statement, it is not far from it. No urban night is like the night there. Squares after squares of flame set up and cut into the other, into ether. Here is our poetry, for we have pulled down the stars to our will. Well, an exalted vision of New York City. Either move or be moved. This is true too. You have to move. And if you are not moved, if you don't move yourself, other people will move you. In a way, it's about choosing to be a follower or a leader. The leader moves himself or herself. The follower is moved. Real education must ultimately be limited to men who insist on knowing, the rest mere sheep herding. A painful statement, but considering my own experience here with the presentations on Zoom, I would say that unfortunately, Ezra Bound might be right. That yes, real education must be ultimately limited to, well, to men. Well, it's not about being limited, but if only a few insist on knowing, then to insist on the others who have no interest in educating themselves, what do you do? So yes, it's a realistic, sad assessment of the situation. Yeah. Now we arrive at the Blast magazine. The Blast magazine was a British magazine, but I think I have a text here about it. Yes. Blast was the short-lived literary magazine of the Vorticist movement in Britain. 2 editions were published. The first on the 2nd of July, 1914, but publication was delayed and featured a bright pink cover referred to by Ezra Pound as the Great Magenta Covers Opusculus. And the second, a year later, on the 15th of July, 1915. Both editions were written primarily by this person, Wyndham Lewis. The magazine is emblematic of the modern art movement in England and recognized as a seminal text of pre-war 20th century modernism. I don't know even how to read the cost of the magazine, is not important, but the term vorticist came from Ezra Pound. He invented this word, and this is I think a very nice invention, linguistic invention, and appropriately it fits the character of this very engaging little magazine that was published in only 2 issues. This is one from the second one from 1915, when there was already war, the First World War, but the Blast refers to that disintegration, that explosion that art is supposed to generate, and a very fresh, graphically speaking, visual message. I mean, this was before the Bauhaus, and still it's remarkably fresh. the graphic language. Just two issues, and Ezra Pound was responsible with the wording there. You know, he was even commenting about it, that it was essentially a painter's magazine, and he was responsible with adding poems. But it was not just poems; it was also critical texts and so on. It was a very engaged, magazine, and the Vorticists, the painters. I'm going to show some paintings by the Vorticists, as as Ezra Pound called them. There was an influence from futurism and from Marinetti, but at one point the Vorticists and the Blast turned against the futurists. I think the works are not bad. You know, it's a modern art, it's abstract, but with the insistence on diagonals, shows tension, conflict. It's truly a dynamic form of abstract art. So this was done not by Ezra Pound, but by the other members of the group, associated with the magazine Blast. The painters. So we know about the Stil, we know about the Bauhaus, but we don't know about this rather interesting movement in Great Britain, which actually preceded both the Stil and the Bauhaus. Now, I thought, and I'm not sure very well why, I mean, I do know why. I wanted to connect somehow with the present. So I chose to show here two works by Bernard Tschumi from his younger activity, when he was openly part of the avant-garde. And I will show first fireworks. He said that fireworks are the best architecture, and he choreographed very interesting fireworks at Parc La Villette. I don't know exactly how he did them, but even graphically, these are very interesting. You know, these notations. I am sure he worked with, or it seems he worked with, some technology here. And we are going to see images of these fireworks. It is very surprising indeed that an architect claims that first loves fireworks, and second, he claims that they are the best architecture. But we have to go beyond the appearance. It was also maybe a provocation. He made other provocations of this kind. The fireworks indeed are in a way the opposite of architecture, because architecture is supposed to be stable, to be protective, to be a shelter, and fireworks in their ephemerality don't even touch upon such desiderata. Anyway, interesting works, and again, I think it's important for the avant-garde to assume different dimensions of cultural discourse. And here they are, a few images. Unfortunately, I couldn't find images with a great resolution, but you still see dramatic fireworks which were choreographed by Bernard Tschumi. In a way, they are blasts. And that's why I thought of kind of connecting with the magazine published, 100 years earlier, more than 100 years earlier in Great Britain, with what Tschumi did at the end of the 20th century. It's like drawing on the sky at night, with fireworks. there are explosions of light, and these arrows, these vectors of light on the night sky, probably were impressive. And it's some kind of also graphic music on the night sky. I like them very much. This is an image in reverse. And now I end this short presentation with a work which I visited by Bernard Tschumi, and which is also connected with what we might call the avant-garde. It's Le Fresnoy, it's in France, the National Studio for Contemporary Arts in Tourcoing, France. It's right at the frontier. It's at the edge of France, northeast of Paris. And I like this work. What he did is he had to keep, or he chose to keep existing buildings, and then he came on top of these buildings with a technological roof, and in between is an interstitial space with passageways, with all kinds of structures. Is very Piranesian, and you feel it's a very interesting feeling to walk, above the sloping roofs of the old buildings. So this is what he did. He came with this roofing above the existing buildings. Then he also played with rather complementary colors, yellow and blue. So it's all based on dynamics. And I have been there. I was lucky to be able to visit it. There were complaints where the people in the administration of the building were complaining that they had problems with birds, sending their droppings through the holes, inside the building. But working on these things, really, it was the otherness of this interstitial space which I admired. I was lucky to be alone here. It was actually closed, the school, but I told them I was coming from the United States, blah, 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 and they allowed me to visit it, and I'm glad I did. I like this work very much. Blast, 1915, the Vorticists, Ezra Pound, a poet, painters. Now, 80 years later, a young architect fighting for contemporary art through his proposing and building a center for contemporary art. All these things somehow are about that turmoil, is about that beginning that Ezra Pound was mentioning. That true art is a new beginning. You must invent new things. You must bring to the fore a new attitude, new forms, new whatever, a new beginning. And that's what I felt in this in this case. At first, I was a little bit uncomfortable about the idea to come with a techno or technological roofing above the old roof. But when I walked through these spaces, it was very engaging and stimulating. This is a book which I actually have, Tschumi, Le Fresnoy, Architecture in Between. And indeed, it was about this in-betweenness. And about in-betweenness, many architects today talk with interest, from Eisenman, and there are other architects who claim that the in-betweenness, in a way, is what should concern us when we are dealing with architecture. And the in-betweenness here mainly is about this interstitial space between the second roof placed above the older ones and the magic of this labyrinth of stairways and passageways and so on. It's yeah, as I said, it's dynamic and inciting. And in a way, some kind of a blast. And in another way, again, it connects to that beginning that Ezra Pound was mentioning, which I think art and architecture, if it is to be serving its time properly, creatively, deal with. You see here the conceptual, the strategy, to bring the technological roof above the older buildings. Sorry about the resolution of these images. Here you see better. I remember Mircea Eliade, who said, "Briser le toit de ta maison," break the roof of your house. Well, here we have something of this sort. Those openings for the light in the roofing, in the second roofing, have to do something. Have to do a little bit with what Eliade said, and maybe, I mean, not maybe, Eliade was referring to the vertical connection with some kind of a divinity. I am not sure if Tschumi thought of this, but all in all, these openings in the roof are symptomatic for an attempt to escape the horizontal relationship and to bring in some kind of a vertical connection with whatever is in this case above. So I will end this presentation with two images. I took this text, and unfortunately I forgot to mention where this short text comes from. Someone has a blog that I discovered on the web. So there are two images. These images have been taken from the book Tschumi, Le Fresnois, Architecture in Between. These drawings have been made whilst Bernard Tschumi had been creating Le Fresnois. And here you see actually the 2 pages of the book. And yes, these drawings are very, very nice. I don't know how he did them, but the person who published this blog wrote about this. The drawing above, meaning this one, the prior drawing, is from an elevation drawing of Lefrenois. The floors are drawn in white, and then the details, such as stairs, room divides, and ceilings, are drawn in black. This all has been drawn against a dark brown background. The part of the drawing I find most interesting is the light quality that has been drawn into the image. You can see where the light source is and how it could then project into the space of Lefrenois. So let's look at it again. I still don't know how this was made, because at that time, when this building was built, I don't think he used computers. Anyway, it's a very nice image, and there is another one that you are going to see now. This one, you see, in a way, it's about the same, bringing the fireworks down to earth. You know, in the representation, the graphic representation of the plans and the building itself. So let's read about this. The drawing above, meaning the previous drawing, is another of Lefrenois. I think that this, the person wrote, I think, it's not me. I think that this appears to be a plan of the light projection. There is a square box made up of arrows, so this could possibly be the flow of the natural light through the building. You can also see the main source of light shown in a solid form and how it projects into the space. This is shown by the light fading out into the drawing, similar to the elevation. The dotted lines that you can see almost suggests that the lights can be moved around the space from point to point. So let's look at it again. If the word vortices comes from vortex, I would say that there is something of a vorticist, representation as well. It's about the vortex of energies that animate the work, and as such, even this work, which was done approximately 80 years after the works published in that Blast magazine in Great Britain, could also be called, if I'm allowed to, a vorticist work. Okay, so that's it. I have something else, but I don't know if okay, let me show you now, since I have it prepared. It's a park which I showed a few images of yesterday by Niki de Sonfal, but I added other images here. And I read that this park, the Tarot Park, or the Tarot Garden by Niki de Sonfal, was inspired by the park, the Bomarzo Park that we just saw. So let's look at the Tarot Garden quickly to see a work which was done apparently inspired by Bomarzo. Sorry, I pressed the wrong thing. Just a second. Something is wrong. Yes. Okay. So I'll show now a garden which was designed and built and conceived, in rather recently. It's a modern work, but inspired by the Bomarzo Park that we just saw in this presentation. And this was done by Niki de Sonfal. And a very interesting work. The Tarot Garden, you see Niki de Sonfal, and the connection with the Bomarzo Park maybe is not, I mean, it can be seen, but there are also maybe other influences. Also, here, if there are any monsters, there is also a humorous side to it, and then the colorfulness and so on. But there is a connection between this Tarot Garden and the Bomarzo Park that we saw, which was built in the 16th century. And this is a remarkable, really, work by Niki de Saint-Phal. And yes, she was not an architect, but the freedom, the exuberance that she displayed in this work is, I think, should generate the envy of the architects. I mean, you can imagine, she probably worked with other people here, but it's all manual work, original work and unique work. And, you know, it required a lot of, I mean, look at just at the surface here, you know, all these pieces were manufactured individually, and they're all different, and then attached to, I guess it's a pillar there or whatever it is. It's a very intricate and complex and visually stimulating work. It makes me think a little bit of Hundertwasser, but there is more to it. And this is a genuine original work by Niki de Saint-Phal. And she also did the statues, the sculptures. We are going to see many works that are part of this very interesting, as it is called, Tarot Garden. There are monsters here too, and you see the relationship, the connection with Bomarzo. But there is transformation. There is this is an original work. The inspirational work of Bomarzo is you know, rather distant now, although it can be seen. But there are all kinds of interesting you know, statues here, and they represent the interests of Niki de Saint-Phal. It's really I think a beautiful work, and with many facets and many meanings. There is humor, there is terror, there is drama, there is playfulness. There are many aspects to this work. And yes, I read about it, and it seems to me obvious that apparently she was influenced by Bomarzo. And it's also in Italy, in Tuscany, this garden. Niki de Saint-Phal, a French brilliant artist. I actually value her work a lot. Here she is with a dog, the creator. Bravo to her. It is an artist who brings back to architecture the magic, the magic of the unconscious, the magic of the imaginary worlds that unfortunately the rationalist architects often forgot. And I think we need this contribution for the art from the artists and artists with plural. So this was done more than 400 years after Bomarzo, but as you can see, in a certain way, although there is a new beginning and the newness of art is a desiderata, still somehow there is a continuum, and maybe to an extent, well, it's a situation where I have to say both. It's a continuum and it's also a new beginning. Between Bomarzo and the Tarot Garden by Niki de Sonfal, maybe it's not such a long distance. Thank you.